Hey, good evening, everybody, or afternoon. I am Cellach McCormick. I am a embroidery laurel, and hopefully you are here for embroidered pouches, embroidered 14th century pouches specifically. If you're here for something else, you're probably at the wrong place. Um, First, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to look at some period examples. We're going to talk about the common traits with those, and then we're going to talk about their construction as well. So I want to start by showing some pouches that I make. I like doing embroidery, and I think pouches are one of the best things to make. Everybody needs pouches. They're small and they can be quick. Uh, and so I've made many pouches. In fact, every year on Valentine's Day, I make my wife a little pouch. I have a whole bunch of rolls. But this is this year's pouch for the embroidery. So it's not quite exactly a whole medieval pouch, but it's pretty close. The embroidery isn't going to show much what we're going to cover in this class, but hey, I just want to make our little bag. Um, and then we also have, this is the smallest little bag I've ever made her. It's super small. Um, I make her bags to put her rings in originally. This is going to be more of the style that we're covering here. And then we also have, this is the same kind of work can be done. This is a brick stitch bag that I made for myself. That's a little bit bigger than a period example, but it's big enough to fit my phone, and that's what I wanted it for. So that's the main bags that we have that I've made to show. I'm going to hop over to my PowerPoint presentation. I'll share my screen here. Okay. I'm waiting for it to catch up here. Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to be talking about 14th century pouches. The example here is the first pouch that I really truly fell in love with. So it's one I always go back to and look at a lot. But this just shows many of the characters that we saw. So I want to talk about what they went into. So the chief characteristics of all the bags, the shape, many of them were rectangular. You also see some trapezoidal pouches. We're not going to cover those today. Those have a little bit more complicated process for creation. And that's a little outside the scope of what we're trying to do. Many of the pouches that were embroidered in this opus Anglicanum style featured scenes of love, and they're often depicted outdoors. I think that's so they could have a lot of sky to do some background embroidery in, and they'd have a lot of floral work in it. The background on all the pouches that I've seen have been completely filled. Most often this was done with couched gold thread. They have hanging cords to draw it closed, and they have a hanging cord to hold it from your pouch or from your belt, and then they have drawstrings to close it. And they really like tassels. So it's common to see these has 5 along the bottom, then 1 on each of the drawstrings. It's also common to see tassels along the edges. They love tassels. Tassels were their thing. And if we look at this pouch, and a couple other things to note is along the edge, you can see a bit of a braid, something to protect the edge of the embroidery as well. And we don't really see that along the bottom. And if we look at the back gold work pouch, you can see a subtle up and down pattern to it. And so this pouch was done with gold, and you can tell that by looking at that background, but also the up and down pattern is made by the couching stitches. So the stitches that they use to hold down the gold work, they did it in a way to give it that pattern. So that's a really fun way of kind of knowing that. And if you look at the top, they also have a band across. This one looks like it's just a woven band that they then worked some eyelets into to draw the drawstrings in. So those are the chief points I want to take away from this one. This one is a super typical alms purse, would be something that they would often be called. It's a love token. It's something that you would give to your, I guess, your boyfriend or your girlfriend, so they can go give charity to the poor. And we have, most commonly, the ones that we have kept to this time all have the gold work on it because they're kind of like the higher end ones. So we'll look at another example. I'll wait for it to pop over. I just want to show real quick this one here too. This has another example. It's similar. It's a black and white photo. We can still see the pattern a little bit on it. We can see the same tassels. We can still see it's rectangular. We can see a band across the top. We can see the braid work on the side with drawstrings and lots of tassels and a hanging cord. So another super common thing. The motifs are the same. The next one here, this is one that I've long always thought they were all done in gold work, and then I found this one, and this one makes sense. This one, if you look, you can see places where it's worn away and it's not as shiny and it doesn't have that same texture on the background. This one was not done in gold work. So this is an example of one that was the background still filled, and we can see places where the stitches that worked has worn away. But we can tell it's been worked. We can look at the top of it here to see that the stitches are running left to right instead of up and down like the rest of the main body. Most of the stitches are going up and down. And that tells me here that we can see through that the top wasn't a band of fabric that was taken like in the first one we saw. This one had an embroidered band going across the top. So I think that was really interesting too. It still has a hanging cord. I think we can see a bit of a drawstring coming through it. And we can see some evidence of maybe some tassels or some kind of other bead decoration on the sides. Next up, we have, this is my favorite pouch ever, and it took a long time. I found a picture from the back of it too. So I thought that was really, really interesting. I've only ever really seen, most of the time you see from the one side. Again, we can see here that we have, it looks like an embroidered edge along the top. We have a scene, again, it's two lovers in nature. We have that gold background with the couching stitches done in a pattern. We have lots and lots of tassels on it. The tassels here are hanging down a little bit lower. And we have really fine, we'll look at this one a little bit closer, but we can see really fine details on the face and on the body. So here I found somebody who was lucky enough to get to actually see this pouch in person, and they got to take the kind of pictures that I'd want to take of the weird angles to try to see how it was put together. And since I saw those, I thought I would share them with everybody else. Some things to note on here. If you look at the bottom right corner or bottom right picture, the embroidery goes from top to bottom. So that tells me that there isn't it's not two pieces that are then stitched together, one to the other. It's one continuous piece. So that means when they were laying out the embroidery, if this is the top of the piece, we'd have one piece that's going, so this way, they'd be set up this way. So when you embroidered it, they'd be, when it was laid out, they'd kind of be upside down from each other. So I think that's really, really interesting. We can see a bit of the braid in the upper right picture. And it's just really neat to see a pouch like this from up close and see different angles of it to get different looks of it. I should ask, do we have any questions so far? If anybody has a question, feel free to pop in and ask.
I'm just curious, like, what scales are the dimensions?
Okay, I think there's a question about dimensions. They're breaking up a little bit.
How many inches wide? How many inches tall?
Okay. I heard they were breaking up a little bit, but I heard whatever were the dimensions of these. These were often small. I have a chart that documents all of the sizes that we found. Most of them we've been seeing have been about 15 centimeters by 14 centimeters. So that's like 5 by 6 inches, with the biggest one being 21 centimeters. So they were, in period, they were small. They were the small little love things that you could give to your lover, and they could be just small and easily kind of transported. Any other questions? I guess there is a chat here. I don't know if people are commenting on that. I should check there too. Okay, what are the dimensions, length and width? So we've talked about that. What are the threads, silk and gold? So for the type of embroidery that we've been looking at here, it has all been silk embroidery. The silk has been done for the figure work and the trees, and the background has all been gold work. We're going to talk a little bit about the embroidery here. So things that I wanted to look at here. So I pulled up two close-ups of this piece so we can talk about this a little bit more. On the first one, if we look at the faces, there's a couple of interesting things. So the embroidery was done primarily in split stitch and stem stitch. If we look at the hair of the person on the left, that to my eye looks like some kind of knot, like French knots were used to give some texture to their hair, which I've always I taught an embroidery class last month, and they were asking about French knots and if I saw them anywhere in period, and I knew I had, and it was here. So they have that. If we look at the amount of shading that they have in the person on the right's hair, they've used, there's many different colors to give it that kind of wavy look. When we look at their faces, when we talk about the embroidery for the faces, they have kind of a defining line for the nose that kind of comes up and into the eyebrow. That's a common thing. And then you see the other eyebrow done. And then the eyes are they don't give them like really whites of the eyes. They're kind of doing like they have a black with kind of a shape for the eyes, and then a little bit of a lip. And then the cheeks are done in circles, so they can get some shading and they can kind of make it look like you have cheekbones and make it maybe make it a little bit rosy or have something like that. If we look on that one, it's also a close-up. If we look above the fellow's head to the left, we can see the gold work working back and forth, and we can see some of that patterning that was done to give it the, I think that's called a dance, is the heraldic pattern that matches up to. But the things to take from there are they're using two strands of the gold thread at a time, and they're working it back and forth as they go through it, which I think is really neat. And then if we jump over to the figure work on the right, we can see here how much shading has gone into the arms. So there's a lot of different colors there that are done. Even maybe just a couple of stitches for each one. And the way that the garments flow, we can tell where the person's arm is. We can tell how it flows, and that runs differently than the lay of the body. So the stitches aren't all running up and down on the figure on the left. They're flowing in such a way to give the illusion of movement and to give it texture and style and to do some shading. If we look at the skirts there, we can see that there's darker parts in the folds, and then it works its way out lighter. So there's a light source that's being shown on the piece, and they're working those colors. Something I've always thought was interesting on this one too is there is a bit of couching work done along the edges of their garments. If you look at the hole in the tunic, I'm not sure why there's a hole in the person's tunic or coat, but there is. If you look at it, there's a bit of gold work done around that that was couched down. There's also some along the bottom of, I think, where the split in the tunic is. And if we look at the person on the right, the bottom edge of their skirt has couched down gold work there as well, and as well as on her neckline. So there's definitely some additional work done there to give it more texture. We have the French knots used to give the hair some texture. There's the gold work done just as a little bit of couching to give the garment some definition to show where the edges are. I'm trying to see what other big things to take from here. Lots and lots of color, lots of shading to do that. I want to give a shout out. This book, there's a book called Opus Anglicanum put out by Tanya Bentham that just came out this year, maybe last year. That has a lot of really good pictures. There's a question in the chat. What is the base material that was used? As far as I can tell, it was linen. I haven't seen any cases where it wasn't linen. You mentioned that you weren't sure about the hole in the garment. Are you referencing the enlarged piece with the blue slit in the? Yes, that's what I'm talking about. The blue slit there on it's like a red or pink garment. There's a blue hole through there. And if we look at the blue dress, there's a hole in that one that shows a bit of red underneath. Both of those, they have a gold work edging done on them, as well as along the bottom, along the top edge of the dress, the blue dress, there's some gold work that's couched down there, and along the bottom edge of the dress. I'm trying to see if we have any other questions. We have a lot of stuff to to get through to when we get to the construction of it too. So I want to make sure we answer questions, but we have a good bit of time on this. Oh, I should put in the chat where the link to this PowerPoint. It has some information on that too. So I'll do that before I forget. If I can figure out how to do that. Nope, that's the Zoom. I'll have to do that here in a minute. Or I'll do that after I've stopped sharing the screen. We'll share this. It says researching, Oswin said, researching 14th century dresses. There's a style for women that had a lace up side on the kirtle. It's speculated for pregnant women. It could be, although the figure on the left also has a slit on there too. So there might be trying to do some kind of allegorical tale too. Oftentimes the two pouches would have different stories. Sometimes they would reference myth or legends. I think romance like Tristan and Isolde was a common one or a popular one. Things like that. Okay, so we are going to get into, this is the general way of doing the construction, which is what I want to take a fair bit of time. We have a fair number of techniques here to get to. This is really, I'm trying to see if there's anything else in the PowerPoint that we need. In the PowerPoint, I have all of the period examples that we showed. I have a link here. It shows a source for all of them. It gives the location and place, the country and year, then the description that came from the museum's website, their size, and then just information about tassels and other things that I observed. And then we also have some documentation in here too. So I'm going to stop sharing this so we don't have quite as much going on. And then I'm going to share I'm going to find the location for the documentation so all of you will have that. Okay, great. So I've put that in the chat. And everybody should be able to get that. So now we're going to talk about methods of construction. And this is something that, so we're going to switch over to the demo one. And we should talk a little bit about design work. I need to share the camera on this one, don't I? If we want to talk about sources, I'll wait for it to come up. A common one is if you're looking for places to get the source material for this or something to use as a decorative source, the Codex Manesse is a great source. I link it to it in there. I have a print copy of it. So these are some of the sample images that are in here. One of the ones I want to show first off the bat is we have pouches. We have the type of pouches that we're covering in this class. They're shown right here and within the book. I thought that was kind of fun too. It has some scenes. This is whenever I think these two people are, to my eye, they look like they're dancing. I don't know if they're just talking and doing the laid back thing. But I've always thought that, to my mind, this is how medieval people dance. And so whenever I want to try to annoy my wife and do a medieval dancing, I just make a hand motion and I dance at her. So it comes from this as the source. There's lots of, so commonly like courtly love kind of scenes. Here's a person kneeling while their lady puts on his helmet. So good courtly love. Here are a couple joining hands with some vine work. That's what I use this one as a piece for my embroidery. And this was the other side of that. Some more vine work and just enjoying each other's company. Just more courtly love scenes. So it's a really great book for romantic pictures. I'm not much of an artist myself to draw pictures, but I'm pretty good at making copies of stuff and sizing it and then taking elements from one or the other and stealing that. So that's one way to do it. Or have really good friends who are good artists, and I've asked them to draw pictures for me too. So that's another way to do it. So when you're laying out your embroidery, so we're not going to cover brickwork, but I think it's a good piece to use as a sample too. So when we're talking about this kind of work, something I like to stress in all of my embroidery classes or any kind of project is before you start a project, do some research and spend some time thinking about the finished product. Think about how you want it to look and how you want it to be, because that's going to influence a lot of your decisions. For example, on this pouch here, I knew that I wanted to, the pattern has an up and down. So I knew partway through I was going to have to flip the pattern. And I also knew that I wanted the pattern to match up if I were to turn the bag around. So when I was laying out the piece, I made sure to have it carry on the pattern side to side. And then I had the pattern switch over partway down. So on this row here, we can see that the fleur-de-lis changed from one direction to the other. And so that's just because I thought about how to make the project ahead of time, and then I laid it out that way and did that. So a little bit of pre-planning will make you have be much happier with your finished product. When we are laying, so for the Opus Anglicana pouches, when you're laying out the embroidery, you're going to have, it's going to be one side's going to be here, and then it's just going to carry on to the back. So if I were to turn this here, I don't know how well this is going to show up, but the pattern just carries on. There's no break at the bottom. The embroidery carries over from side to side. So when you're laying out the piece, you have to kind of think about that kind of things too. So I would mark it off and do that. So once you have your embroidery done, we're going to talk about, so there's characteristics that we want to have. We need to have a lining in it. We need to have the hanging cords. So there's a lot of things that we need to do. The hanging cords have been a source of frustration to me for a long time, trying to figure out the best way to attach them and to get them to work. And I think I have that figured out. So after you have your embroidery done, the next thing you're going to do is you want to size the piece. You want to get it down. And then we're going to use this as this is a sample bag. I'm going to make a easy pouch. And I've tried to stage this like I'm on a cooking show where I have the hard, like the easy parts already done. So we're going to pretend that there's embroidery on it. I've sewn up the sides to make it easy. So I don't need to have you do all that. Since this is a demo piece, I did it by machine. I'm trusting that you guys won't judge me too harshly for doing that. So the next thing we need to do is we need the very next step that I have found is to install the hanging cords. What I have found is if I have the hanging cords on the inside of the bag attached to the shell, it's the best way for it to work. So what I did is I've made some finger loop braids that I'm going to use for the hanging cord and for the drawstrings. I don't think we have enough time to really dig into how to make finger loop braids. In the class handout, I have a link to a really good website, fingerloop.org, I think, that has really good videos on learning how to do this. I think that finger loop braids are the quintessential 14th century way of making cordage. But in a pinch, I've used lucid cord before, and that's been okay too. So we're gonna pretend we have our hanging cord here, and I need to mount it to the side. So I need to, the next thing that we're gonna do is what I want to do is I'm gonna take this side, I'm gonna fold down the seam allowance, and then I'm going to fold this down because I'm going to have a finished edge at the top eventually. So I want to have a nice finished edge right here. So I've turned this down, I've turned that down, and then I'm going to take my braid, I'm going to put it right here. And I have found that pinning it helps a little bit. Okay, so now I have that pinned in here. I have the top folded down. I have the seam allowance pinned down. And then I'm going to just take a needle and thread, and I'm going to run it through here. And I'm going to stitch this on. Ideally, I want to just kind of catch the seam allowance instead of having it come all the way through to the outside. But I'm going to go all the way up one side. And then I'm going to go down the other side as well. And ideally, you'd use more stitches than I'm using. This is a quick and dirty job. And it always figures that when you're teaching, your needle is going to come unthreaded. So you have to account for that too. Okay. So I usually like to trim this up a little bit. I should have trimmed this up at the beginning. So I'm going to just take a moment here. I don't need all of this excess, so I'm going to just trim that up. So now it's not in my way. And when I get down to the bottom here, what I'll often do to protect the cord is I'll just kind of try to encase it in some threads. You could also take a little bit of, I'm a little leery about doing it, but you could take some Wonder Under or something like that to put that in. But just doing some stitches here will help reinforce that. So it's already looking pretty good. So I could do a couple more stitches there. So now this hanging cord is attached to one side. Then you just do a real quick overhand knot. We'll just do 2 real quick. And I'm going to cut that. So we have it attached on one side. And then you're going to want to do the same on the other side. And so I'm going to just take a stitch or two. It's not going to be very sturdy because, again, I don't want you all don't need to spend all your day watching me perfectly sew in a liner or the hanging cord for a bag. So we're going to just lay that in real quick. Okay, we're going to pretend that that's good enough for now. If anybody's worried, I am intending on making this into like a little bag for myself later, so I will come back and actually properly do it. So we now have a hanging cord that would ideally be attached to both sides. So we have something that we could hang the bag down from, and it's all on the inside still. The next thing to actually do, maybe a little counterintuitively, is we're going to actually start the braid. So along the side edge, to protect the edge, there's a lot of different things that you could do. You could weave. I could take one of these finger woven braids, and I could sew that down over the edge. That'd be one thing to do. I could set up a couple tablets, and with a jig, and do tablet weaving along the edge of it. That's another thing to do. What I want to show is a technique that I saw that's going to make a braid on its edge as we're going through. And it's just been really, really neat. And it uses two needles for the braid. So I have one, I'm going to have alternating colors. and it makes a really interesting band along the edge. So it's going to look like this. So to do that, I have two different colors. And I found that I want them to be on the inside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the very corner here, and I'm going to press my needles. And ideally you do this for both the left and right side, but we're only going to do one side right now. There's one. And here's two. And if we were doing this, we'd do the other side as well. So we'd end up having 4 pieces. Ooh. Oh man, see, you get in a rush. I get in a rush, and then I do things like catching my braid here. I got the hanging cord. Okay, so we have that free, and then I'm just going to tie another knot. Okay, and then I can tidy up these ends here a little bit if I want. So if I'd also on a real bag, I'd have 2 more on the other side as well. So I'd have all of the braids already ready to go. And now I can go ahead and turn this bag right side out. Okay, and we can see we have our things that we're going to use for the braid down here. But the next thing we're actually going to do is we're going to take our liner. So I've made a linen liner. The liners were made out of linen. I haven't seen anything that tell me any kind of color or any kind of preference. So I like to make it a contrasting color because I figure this is a lover's token and it needs to be fancy. So I cut the liner out to be slightly smaller than the shell. It doesn't need to be much, like just a fraction of an inch is more than enough. So then I'm going to take this liner. I'm going to put it inside the bag. So now I have both the liner and the inside there. And then the next thing to do is I'm going to fold down both and pin them together and then sew that together. So I'm going to do that real quick where I can face it to me.
You are slightly off camera.
Yeah, thank you. So all I'm trying to do is I want to go around the edge and match. I'm folding both in. And I want to make sure kind of like the corners line up or the very edge and pin it. And then I would go the whole way around. I'll just do that real quick. Okay, so now I have it pinned in. And then I would just do like a blind stitch to attach the liner to the shell. So that's going to be, I'm going to just kind of work my needle here. Ideally, I couldn't find any blue thread real quick. It's in a project bag. So I grabbed red, but I usually try to match the outside of it than the inside. So I just try to kind of catch here, just catch the very edge. And then I would do this the whole way around. And every once in a while, I do a stay stitch. So I'm making a loop and I just run my thread through there. So I could go the whole way around this, but again, we have 20 minutes left. And I want to show a couple other techniques. So we'll pretend that it's all stitched in. And I'm gonna just pull out these pins so they don't get in our way. Okay, so once we have the liner sewn in, we are ready to start work on the braid along the side edge and then the top. And then on the other side, we'd go up that edge and then we'd go the other part of the top. So both the full sides would get covered in braid as well as the top to help protect it. And so to do this, I really like this technique and it's really simple to work. So we're going to, we have 2 threads here.
How did you decide how long those threads should be?
So the threads, what I did, that's a really great question. I started by taking, since they're doubled over, I measured from the bottom corner all the way up to the top and then to the other edge. And it needs to be at least doubled that because that's going to be the absolute bare minimum. And then I added at like 10%, 20% to that. So a little bit longer than that because there's going to be, as I'm braiding these, it's going to take a little bit more to do. I can make them, I can hit, as long as it's longer than that, it's okay. When we get down to the bottom, we can cut it off and end it. So it doesn't matter too much if it's slightly too long. We really don't want it to be too short. So too long is better than too short. So what we have, we are gonna go here. And I have a thread here with a needle and thread. And I'm going to come in through here.
It also looks like it's wool thread versus, or linen versus, it looks thicker than sewing thread. So it's, what kind of thread is it?
So that this would show up well here on camera, I'm using a thick wool to help so you can visually see it. When I've done this in the past, I've used the embroidery thread or the silk embroidery thread I'm using. I've used that before for the edging. So this here is just done in like I think it was 12 strand Splendor embroidery floss, and I just used all 12 of the strands together instead of taking them apart to do that braid. So I'm going to fix down each, I have that down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this red one. I'm going to open up these white ones and I'm going to go take the red one forward and the white one back. And then I take my needle and I run a stitch there. I'm really having no luck keeping this needle threaded today.
So basically what you're doing is that as close to each crossover, you're kind of tacking the thread down or the cord down.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, that's 100% true. So that was the first one. And then I'm just going to take the white one and go through the red. So just bringing them back and forth. every once in a while, maybe I'll do a second stitch to help hold it in place. And just take one through the other. And you can already see a little bit of the pattern forming. So Hilder says, so are you couching a braid? That is basically what I'm doing. That's not basically, that's what I'm doing. I am couching a braid to the edge of this. So if we can see, we can already see the nice chevron pattern developing. And then I'm going to just do one or two more stitches here of this. So again, we're going to take this one and go through here. Just bring them back and forth. And then every once in a while, if I'm looking at it, this white is it's a little wonky on that side, so I might give it a little tug to help keep it in line. And what I want is I'm trying to protect this edge right here. So I want to just keep it right on that edge. So I would work that all the way up, and then I would take it and I'd work it along the top edge until I got to right here. And then what I end up doing is I end up feeding the needles in, and then kind of pulling it out of like the bottom over here. Like I feed the needle in and I kind of feed it out the other edge, and then I snip it. So I cut it short and I make sure to really reinforce the top part so the braid doesn't pull out. And then I will repeat that with the other braid going around the other side. And that one, once you have one side done, when you're pulling out the needle from the side, you're trying to hide it underneath the braid from the other side too. Does that make sense? Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this part?
Is there a cheat for turning the corner?
Yes. Well, not really a cheat, but what you want to do is when you get really close to the corner, on the very corner itself, you do 2 or 3 stitches and you do a locking stitch to help hold it in place. So you're just really reinforcing that point in particular. And I found like this is a really forgiving kind of technique. So it works well for kind of turning the corner and doing that. Any other questions? Okay, great. The next thing I want to talk about then is we would have the bag, we'd have it now to a part where it's really looking like a bag, except it doesn't have drawstrings or tassels, and we need to have both those things to get it done. So one way of doing it, if this were one of the embroidered bags that we saw, maybe I didn't do it on that one. I'm trying to find as we saw on the period pieces, you could couch, or not couch, you can make little eyelets. So I embroidered eyelets through here, then to feed my piece through. And to make an eyelet, what you do is you take an awl, you take your awl, you take your fabric and you wiggle it back and forth because you're trying to part the threads. I'm not trying to make a hole. I want to part the threads. So I'm kind of moving it back and forth. And now I have a hole right here. And then I would take my needle and thread. I take my ooh, it's still attached. So we're going to cut that. I'm just going to get a new piece. And if you are doing an embroidered pouch, you would do any kind of pouch. If you wanted to have the eyelets actually done, you'd have to do that before you started. Before you got to this part would be better. When it was still flat would be the best place to do it. But from what I've seen, eyelets in the 14th century were not as fancy as they became later. So I'd want to match the color of the thread or the color of the fabric. But to do an eyelet, I can just really at this time period, I can just go around the eyelet, the hole, and just kind of pull it.
Are you doing a blanket stitch?
I am not. Nope. At this, I have done blanket stitches before, but the evidence were this is kind of the starting of buttonholes or of that, and they didn't have that technology yet. So they hadn't developed that yet from what I've seen, looking through what is it, textiles. There's a Museum of London Textiles and Clothing book. And this is what they show in there. It's just kind of going around, just doing what is it called? It's like a whip stitch around the edge. So I end up usually going around twice. So I'll go all the way around my eyelet once.
So you said to do it before we sewed the lining in, so that the drawstring is in the behind the lining.
So if I were doing this, if I were doing it this method, I got a little out of order, and I apologize for that.
That's fine.
I would do this before I even sewed the front and the back together. So before anything was sewn together while it's laying flat is the best time to do eyelets. So if this were the pouch, we'd now be at like this part where it's not anything sewn together. Then I'd sew these together this way. So then you just make a second pass. After the embroidery, before the sides are sewn together, correct. That is 100% true. So I'd go the whole way around, and then I would sew tie another knot in it, maybe two. And then call that a day. And then what we saw looking at the period examples are if you're doing eyelets, you could do one set of eyelets for both of the cores to go through. Or you can do two separate eyelets to have each cord have its own. So you're going to want to have two cords for when you're pulling it. So we'd have the eyelets would have been done. But on a pouch like this, if you're making a pouch out of wool, you don't necessarily have to go and make eyelets. So what I would do, what I did on the bag for my this year's Valentine's Day gift is I took my quilters. I think it's a quilters one. And I just figured out where I wanted the eyelets to go. So I wanted them to be like a 1/2 inch down. And then evenly spaced. So I just kind of marked where I wanted them to be. I should be measuring this, but I'm not going to.
Did they do odd, even?
So that's what's going to be the next thing. Even is the way to go. So what I want to do with I want the cord to come along on the outer part of it. So here's one side. It comes out one set of holes. It goes all the way around, and then it's going to be outside the bag to help draw it closed. So it's going all on the outside. And to get that to happen, you have to have an in and an out. So every time you have to have the same you have to have an even number of holes to get that to happen. With a wool bag like this, I could instead mark out where they're at, and I can just take my awl and I can just work it back and forth. If it's a good wool, it's going to be fine. You don't really need to go to all that to protect the edge quite as much. So right here, I have a nice hole. This wool here is nice and thick and well felled. It's not gonna really frag on me there. So for this one, I'm okay. So I would have my my four holes. And the trick that I found for this is I need to feed my drawstring through, which is going to be another finger loop braid. And I can't just fit it through like that. So what I end up doing is I take masking tape. I take it to the end of my braid and I encase it. I try to pull it really tight. So I'm twisting it. And then I'll take my needle and I'll cut a little bit, or my scissors, and cut it. So I've now made a masking tape egglet. And then I can feed this through. I might use my awl to help make the hole a little bit wider. And I might try to get both. So then I'll take this and I wiggle it. I'm just going through the shell. So I would really, what I end up doing most of the time is I'll take my awl and I'll line up both of the holes and I fold it. So by going this route, I can try to just get I can try to work it through both of them at the same time. And then I'd go to my next set of holes and then wrap it around to the back. Does that make sense?
Do you have a size, way you size the drawstrings?
The drawstring needs to be at least as wide, like, so if this is 5 inches, it has to be at least 10 inches at a minimum, just to cover the distance when it's open. And then I wanted to, so I would probably make it one that's 14 or 15 inches at least. And then once it's done, when I pull it, that's when I can decide, like when I'm closing it, I'll try to take a look and judge how far down I want how well it looks like what is visually appealing to me when I have the drawstring, when I have the bag closed, and then I'll cut it.
So like if you're gonna add a tassel and where you want the tassel and the blah, blah, blah. Okay,
right.
that makes sense. Artistic license.
Yep, artistic license. Which, speaking of tassels, we have 6 minutes left, and that's the last thing I really want to cover. So we're gonna make a quick tassel here. So I'm gonna make it out of wool, and I'm gonna use my hand here. You can use a business card as a sizing thing to do it too. So I'm gonna hold it, and I'm just gonna wrap it. I don't know, 5, 7. So I just went around this one like 10 times, I think. And then I snipped it. So now I have a bunch of thread on my hand. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another piece and I'm going to work it under and work it up to the very top. And then I'm going to tie a knot here. Ooh, I should try to keep this a little bit longer. Because what I'm going to end up doing is this cord or the thread that I'm using to tie is what I end up using to attach the tassel to the bag along the bottom. It's 1 and 2. Okay, so this is still not looking very tassel-like. What I need to do is I need to attach, I can take a cord and attach it along the waist. So I will take my tassel and I'll take a cord. And I'm trying to tie a little knot. And I might try to play with it a little bit. Okay. And then for those pieces here, I want to tuck those in. So I might take another needle.
I was just gonna let you know, because you're the last class of the day on this track. If you need to go over a little bit, feel free to go over time a little bit.
Okay. So I'm going to tuck them in. I also want to be respectful of people's time. I'm perfectly okay with staying on a little longer, but I don't want to. I know we all have busy lives. Okay, so I'd have them both tucked in. And then so this is not the prettiest tassel I've ever made, but that's okay. If I were doing a Turk's head knot, if you look at the period examples, they all have fancy stuff along the edge. This would be the time to make a Turk's head knot in a contrasting color and to slide it over top. So you can either, I found it's easier to do like around my finger and then work it down over top of this and then tighten it up as you're going, than to try to actually work it over top of something like this. But to each their own. So that'd be the time to do that. And then to get to be a tassel, you take the bottom loops and then you snip them. So now it looks a lot more like a tassel, except I have a couple really long ones. So I kind of trim it up a little bit. So now it looks a lot more like a tassel. And then I can use this. I can run these through the bottom of my bag. I'll run this one this way and this one this way. I'll stitch it two. I'll do a stitch or two, tie a knot, and then I will take these when they're out and I'll run them through the bottom, through the tassel again, and then snip them off at the bottom. So it's all self-contained and hidden. If I wanted to do a tassel on a cord like this, what you do is you make the tassel, and then you feed the cord inside before you tie off the bottom. And then you tie it so you can kind of feed, like you don't tie the hanging cord or the drawstring closed until you feed it through the tassel. Then you tie it and then you position it. And then you put the waist on there and you kind of scooch it down. And if you were going to do a Turk's head knot, maybe you don't cut the bottom and you work it on. Like you have to just kind of play around with that a little bit to get it to everything to sit quite how you want it to. And that takes a little bit more work to get it to go that way. So that's the really quick. We're at 6 p.m. And that covers everything I wanted to cover. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything that anybody wants to see again?
Well, I'd like to see you attach that tassel to a cord, but that's me.
Okay. Cool. So we have our tassel here. And then we're going to just run it through. We're going to go through this cord instead. Ideally, I would not have made the waist yet. So we're going to pretend we're just going to make another tassel real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then I don't really need something so I have it here. I have it on my hand and I could have my drawstring, and that we could pretend that this is on the bag, right? We don't need to see all that. And I can feed this through here like that. And then it can come along to the other side. And then what I have historically done, so now that it's through here, maybe now is the time to develop another hand would be good. But what I could also do is I can take a needle. Oh, shoot. A trick that I found is sewing these two together instead of tying a knot in the hanging cord or the drawstring.
Okay.
I'm looking for my needle here.
See the thread. So one side is outside of the tassels, you're making it.
So right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both layers. I'm going to run my needle through. So the drawstring ends up making the kind of the core of the tassel.
Ah. Mind blown. Okay.
That's what I'm here for. So see here how I'm just sewing them together.
Yep.
Okay, and we'll tie a knot. Maybe one more. Okay, I'll trim this up. I'll trim this up. So now I have like this I probably have a bunch more stitches in here to keep it
Yeah, so
stationary.
it doesn't fray and yeah, come
Right.
apart.
But then I'm just gonna work that up into the very top of this. So now I have that there, and then I need to get a piece of,
And then you would do your header. Yep.
yep. So we'll take this, and ideally this might be a like this, I would want probably a thicker tassel for this.
So all that Turk's head stuff would have gone on all that first. Not that I can do a Turk's head, but you know,
There's
dreams. You would have stuck all that on first, then you would have done all the stuff you just did.
The
Okay.
Turk's head knot. So the Turk's head knot would be, then this would be where I'd work the Turk's head knot onto it.
Oh, okay.
So while it's before I cut it, I would work the Turk's head knot because this is a lot easier to work this through like this when it's kind of, you can group it together.
Yep.
Or you could even, I saw somewhere where somebody took like some plastic wrap and wrapped it around it to help kind of hold it together.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
So once you have that, you slide the Turk's head knot up and then you position it, you tighten it up. And the Turk's head knot's actually enough to hold everything together. So you don't really need
So you don't
do
have to do a header underneath the Turk's head knot?
right.
Okay.
Because you're tightening that up. But
Yep.
since we're
Okay.
not doing one of those, I would then take my thread.
Like you did before, and then you work them back through.
Yep.
Well, that's fabulous. Thank you.
So, and ideally, like a Turk's head knot would make this really look nice, or more volume would make it look good too. But that's
Well,
the-
yeah, yeah. You know, it's just quick and dirty to show. Yeah.
So
Wow.
there's an ugly tassel on the end of a cord.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Did
Okay.
everybody understand how to tie it inside and bring it back down?
Yeah, that made sense.
Great. So I have the PowerPoint is in the instructions or in the chat. It has my email address on it. I'm also available over Facebook or Messenger. If you make a bag and you want to show it off, I love seeing people's embroidery. So absolutely feel free to show me anything that you're working on, or if you have any questions or problems, I'm here for that too.
This was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.